Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, depending on where you are zooming in from. Welcome to 2022. I just welcomed Barbara and Gabby to 2024, so I'm a little ahead of the game here. But welcome to 2022. I'm just so incredibly grateful, and so is the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation, that we'll be beginning our year with a conversation with Barbara Karnes and Gabby Jimenez, two of my favorite people to talk with. So thank you all for putting this up, for putting up where it is you're zooming in from. We have people coming in from all over the country, and we've got the UK here. And so welcome to you all. My name is Susan Barber, and I am the Community Education Manager for the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation. And I want to just welcome you all from the foundation. For those that are new to the foundation, the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation is a not-for-profit organization that's inspired by the life of psychiatrist, humanitarian, and hospice pioneer, Dr. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. It's in the spirit of embracing all of life, which includes death, that we further her mission and vision through collaborations, education, and advocacy. And one of the things that Elisabeth held dear to her heart always was the idea that unconditional love is some of the best medicine we have to offer. So in that spirit, we offer this program this morning in the hopes that you will all walk away with a better understanding about what hospice is and what hospice is not. I want to introduce today, first I'll introduce Barbara Karnes. Boy, more than maybe 7 years ago now, when I became a community education manager at a hospice program, the very first person that we had an event with was Barbara, who I had known of her work for decades working in hospice. Barbara has produced a number of beautiful booklets, which are so helpful to people, as anybody who's cared for someone who's been ill or has been ill themselves knows. Reading through a big, thick book about what's happening to you is generally not very useful when you are really in the weeds. But Barbara has put together a collection of incredibly useful, short, to the point, and written in a way that almost everybody can understand what's happening at end of life. She's written about pain. She's written about barriers to good care. She's written about the actual process of dying. And often our families, once they received her little blue book called Gone From My Sight, they would come to the door the next nursing visit and say, Mom's on page 7. This is so easy to understand now. So Barbara has really moved this conversation so much further down the road than certainly when I began this work in 1997. Barbara's an internationally respected speaker, educator, author, and thought leader on all matters end of life. She's a renowned authority on the dying process and leading educator for families, healthcare professionals, and the community at large. Barbara's award-winning DVDs and books about death and dying are starting conversations and changing lives, and certainly changing the way people die. In her work, Barbara compassionately explains stages of the dying process, living with a life-threatening illness, pain management, and how people grieve. She also really emphasizes how important it is to take care of yourself as a caregiver, and offers guidelines both for professionals and for people who are navigating this, who are family members and loved ones. Gabby Jimenez is a former colleague of mine. She's a hospice nurse and end-of-life doula and a conscious dying educator. She's written 3 books. She writes a weekly blog and has a hospice Facebook page, which today topped 80,000 followers. Her focus is on trying to change the culture relative to death and dying, to help others feel more comfortable talking about death. While she sees a lot of death, what she really finds joy in is her lessons, which are about love, life, culture, tradition, and faith. She combines this experience as a hospice nurse with her in-depth doula training to help her be more present at the bedside, bringing both patient and family together at the intimate moment of death. She also teaches, which is her other love. She teaches courses on end-of-life care, which are helpful to anybody working and caring for people. Something that all of us will have at some point or another to navigate in our own lives if we haven't already. So with that, I will also be following the chat. So please, thank you very much for being here. If you have a question, we are going to turn off we're going to mute people right now. And when Barbara and Gabby are done with their presentation, with their kind of conversation, we're going to open this up then to the rest of the room so people can ask questions. You can do that in a couple of ways. One way is you can just type it and put it up in the chat, and I will be following that and asking the questions if you are too shy to ask in person. The other way, and I think both Barbara and Gabby prefer this, would be to go to the bottom or the top of your screen to the reactions button. There's a little smiley face there. If you click on that, one of the options is to actually raise your hand. And what that allows me to do is see the order in which you've raised your hand so that I'm able to follow who's raising their hand and who has a question. So without too much further ado, I am going to bring in, oh, Barbara, now I've just lost you. I'm going to bring in Barbara, and I'm going to bring in Gabby, and here's Gabby. Let's see, Barbara. Barbara, could you raise your hand? Just do the hand raise thing if you can, and that will make it easier for you to spotlight you.
I'm raising, I'm wiggling.
Let's see. I'm still looking for you here somehow.
Okay.
We went to the very end here, and there are so many people in our room right now.
Oh, isn't that exciting? I'm so thrilled to have so many.
There you are, Barbara. Thank you for your patience, and I am going to leave this.
There she is.
So I'm wondering if you, and thank you so much. Yeah, there's so many familiar faces here on this screen and so many folks who are joining us, I think, for the first time. So I'm wondering if it's, I wonder if maybe one of this topic is about what do I need to understand about hospice? And I know that both of you have so much to say about this, but I'm wondering if maybe you both, if each of you could begin by just talking about maybe a hospice myth, something that you hear on a regular basis about hospice, which is maybe a misunderstanding or an inaccurate understanding. And from that point, I'm sure you will have lots to talk about. We'll have a half an hour at the end for the Q&A part. So,
Barbara, you want to go first?
No, I loved your question, your idea. So let's talk about that. Get it started because it's so much of a myth out there. If I were going to go number one, that'd be my number one. So let's talk about it.
Okay, so raise your hand if someone has said to you or you have heard, I don't want to put my dad on hospice because when they go on hospice, they're given morphine and they die. Like, I hear that so many times. And here's the thing, when someone comes on hospice, they've already been given a diagnosis. It has already been made clear, however, sadly, that there is a very short amount of time left. And so they're already heading down that path. When you come on hospice, you are given a team of people who collaborate to provide care so that your landing is soft, and for the people that you love, so their landing is soft. And that team works together to make sure that they address all the things that are needed. Is medication used? Yes. Is morphine one of them? Yes. If you've read anything I've said or heard my opinion, I am not a big fan of just going in straight guns blazing with medications. I like to try other things too. But I think that medications are key, and I think you need to have them, and I want you to have trust in them. And can someone die after taking morphine? Absolutely. But here's the thing, and this is the way I explain it to families. When someone has symptoms, whether it's anxiety or pain, they're struggling in some way. These medications, in many ways, they speak to the body and they say, here, I'm going to give this to you so you can find peace. Is that medication going to end the life? No. Could they die after? Yes. And here's the reason, at least from my perspective. It's because that medication has finally brought so much comfort and relief to that person that they can finally let go and succumb to what their body is already doing. Hospice does not kill somebody. I have never witnessed that. Hospice provides care for someone who is dying. And Barbara and I will talk more deeply into this about the different ways the team helps, but does morphine end a life? In my perspective, we do not give enough medication to end a life. And it is something I encourage you to find trust in. And if you are fearful of it, if you are uncertain in any way, then you ask questions. And if you're not getting your answers, then go somewhere else. Find it, go to another nurse, another doctor, but find someone who can help you to understand the benefits these medications bring. I have witnessed it myself. I have watched someone have morphine, have lorazepam, have haloperidol, have methadone. They take this medication and it softens them, and pain and anxiety. And sometimes it takes longer. You know, Barbara and I, we talk about this all the time. It sometimes takes a little longer than we want, but at the end of the day, the body succumbs to the medications that are given, and they are able to find peace and die. And I find comfort in that.
You know, so often we hear, hospice came in, they told me to give morphine, and 15 minutes later, mom was dead, and it was the morphine that killed them. What I really want people to understand is, if someone is given morphine and they are at death's door, they are hours from death, their body is shutting down, and their organs, their lungs, their kidneys, their heart, their circulation is not working normally. And so, generally speaking, if someone has morphine, put it under their tongue, put it in their rectum, and 30 minutes later they're dead, that morphine is probably still in the rectum, or it is still under their tongue, because their body isn't working right. And so it isn't even getting the medication into the bloodstream so that the person could have an overdose if that were the case. And what we don't understand is the physical dynamics of the body and what's going on in the hours before death. It's shutting down. Nothing works right. And so the morphine didn't kill in that last hour or 2 hours because it didn't have the opportunity to be circulating through the body to do anything.
And people need to, I want them to hear that, because what happens after someone dies is the person who is at that bedside, they take that with them, and that guilt, it lingers in them for a lifetime after. And I want so badly to help people to not go through that, to not feel that. There's so many misconceptions. I mean, we were talking earlier, Barbara, you were going to talk, what were you going to say next? You were going to share something about, I'll let you handle this one.
Well, one of the myths is that people die like they do in the movies. Yeah. You know, most of us are not at the bedside when someone's actually dying. We don't have role models. And so when we're at the bedside, we're emotionally involved, and we're scared, but we don't have anything to draw on except television and the movies. And when our loved one doesn't say something profound and then they're dead, you know, then we think something pathological is happening. And this is why 90% of hospice's work is education, so that we can help that family and all of those at the bedside have a sacred experience that, as Gabby said, they're going to carry the memory of what happened at the bedside with them forever. And we want them to have a sacred memory, not a frightened one. And part of that is teaching them of destroying the myth that we carry, that dying is someone says something profound, or they close their eyes and then they stop breathing and they're dead. And it just doesn't happen like that. because really it's not necessarily pretty when someone dies. You know, I equate it to the little chicken that's working to get out of its shell. And we watch that chicken work and work and work and peck to get out of its shell. That's what the person who's dying is doing. They're working very hard to get out of the shell of a physical body. And it isn't necessarily pretty. There's unpleasant sounds, there's unpleasant smells, there's unpleasant actions. And our job as end of life workers is to help families and those at the bedside to understand that nothing pathological is happening. It may not be pretty, but it isn't pathological. The person is doing the work they need to do to get out of this physical body.
You know, I think when I was first starting in hospice, I felt this need to provide a peaceful death, a good death. I wanted to encourage people to anticipate that, because of course that's what we want. But what I have found over the years is how important it is to give the other side of things, because, and I've heard you say this many times, the body knows what to do. And so I go on that when I talk to families. I tell them the body knows what to do. And like you said, it's not always pretty. It's not going to always be beautiful. They aren't going to close their eyes, put their hands over their chest and say, I'm going now. And sometimes that does happen. And that is a beautiful thing. But the body knows what to do. And so you're right, education is key. I find that if I explain everything to them, give them some of the dirty stuff, you know, the death rattle, the saliva out of the mouth, like you said, sensor smells and sounds scare people. But what if you tell them up front? What if you say, this is going to happen? This might happen. This could happen. And give them all of that so that when it does, there's less fear. What I would rather have at the bedside is a family who is prepared for it all and relieve them of fear than watch them struggle with the scary sounds and all that goes on. I think you're right. Our job is to educate. Our job is to prepare people and to know both sides. Death is not always pretty. And it is going to happen to every single one of us. That is inevitable. And how can we make it a little bit kinder? And I think by doing that is not by pretending that it's always beautiful. It's not, but it is part of life. And how we educate and prepare someone can change their takeaway. I'm all about the takeaway. What are they going to take from this situation? They're going to take, well, you know what? Gabby and Barbara, they told us it could be like this. And actually it wasn't so bad because I was prepared. I was less afraid.
I also reassure families, mom's doing a good job. Mom's doing what she's supposed to be doing to get out of her body. You know, and that in itself neutralizes some of the fear that the family who are watching this, what they consider unusual, and sometimes they think it's pathological behavior, to reassure them, mom's doing what she's supposed to be doing. This is how she gets out of her body. And look, she's doing a great job. I think another important part of our work at the bedside is to encourage the family to interact. We've both gone into rooms and seen a person actively dying in bed, and the family is standing around, generally holding their hands, watching. And I'll go in or you'll go in and we'll say, you know, you can get in bed with mom if you want to. You can hold her. And you know, that dog you're holding back, get that dog on the bed, get the cat on the bed. You know, talk to mom, have an interactive experience as mom is dying. People are going to carry that memory with them forever. And we don't know what to do at the bedside. We're scared as we watch, and we don't know what to do. And that's where our job as end-of-life workers come in, is to give the family permission to get in the bed, permission to talk to their loved one. I encourage each family member in the hours before death, when a person is non-responsive, it's a lot easier to talk to someone who's not going to argue back with you, is to have each person go into the room and spend time alone with their loved one and talk from their heart. Say all the things they've ever wanted to say, the positive, the negative. There's no perfect relationship. And so you talk about the difficult times as well as the love-filled times. That the person that's dying is processing their life. They've been processing their life for months on many levels. And so that alone time, it's like helping the person that's dying put the pieces of their life puzzle together. Our lives are a billion-piece jigsaw puzzle. And in those hours to minutes before death, when we can say everything that's in our heart, adds all of the pieces of the puzzle slide into place, not just for the person that's dying, but for us, the survivors that are left behind. And I think this is such an important role for end-of-life workers. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say what saddens me about the changes that have occurred in hospice care over the years is the lack of that hours to minutes before death contact with the family to support and guide them. That's where end-of-life doulas are stepping in and filling a void that hospice originally filled, but because of all the micromanaging and everything, isn't really able to do today. And it's a vital part of end-of-life care, is supporting that family at the moment of death.
I love you. When my dad died, I sat on a bench 15 feet away from him. And I sat there because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. If I knew then what I know now, how many times have we said that? I would have been right there. And we tend to tell people it could be hours to days. You know, sometimes I could be pretty spot on and say it's minutes and bring everyone together. But one of the things that I have found is, as much for, and you said this too, but as much for the person lying in the bed as those who are saying goodbye, is the importance of the takeaway. Like, what did you say? Did you finish those words? But sometimes people, you know, you think that they've got hours and they could last days, and people want to know, why do they linger? Why aren't they going now? They haven't eaten in 4 or 5 days. And I think this is where our education is really key. One of the things that I have started saying to families is, here's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine that today is the last day. This is your last day with them. I want you to say the things. I want you to, if they like music, play music. If they watch Jeopardy at 3 o'clock, put on Jeopardy at 3 o'clock. You do everything you think they would want. You say everything, and don't hold back tears. It's okay to be human. You are sad that you are saying goodbye to someone you love. Say that. Give them some takeaways. Tell them all the things. And if tomorrow you wake up and they're still with you, that's a bonus day. Now, you may have 2 weeks of bonus days. But on that one day, that day right now, today, you said those things. And then they start to say, well, what do we say? You know, 3, 4, 5 days of sitting at the bedside is exhausting. It's emotional. It can actually be incredibly painful for family members because they truly believe someone is suffering. But my feeling is that the illness is ending the life. The body is slowly shutting down. All of this is real, but it's not quite ready to go yet. So there's 2 things that I always tell them. One is he's 86 years old. He's got a lot of time to say goodbye to. There's a lot of things he wants to say, you know, thank you legs, thank you heart, thank you eyes, thank you hands, all the things that body's experienced. Maybe that lingering time is their opportunity to say all the things themselves. And now recently, I suggested to a family member who was alone, she was the only one that was at the bedside. I said, find a book. It could be, you know, Moby Dick, something that's got some longevity to it, right? And read a few chapters every day. Now, you may or may not finish that book, but it sets intention for however long that wait might be. And it stops the family from sitting there watching each breath, counting each breath, because that anticipation is going to kill them. It's going to drive them insane waiting. And so what I say, if it's a bonus day, just make it the best bonus day, knowing that there could be more following, but setting a family up for it's going to happen at 3:40, which I have done myself. I don't do that anymore for that exact reason. It could be hours or days.
Yeah.
Let's just stick with today. Say the things.
I think it's important that we explain to our families that a person has limited control over the time that they die, that we die according to our personality, and that we will die the way we've lived. And so look at that personality, look at how they've lived their life. An A-type personality, that A-type personality who's a doer, a goer, they will probably die more quickly than the personality that's more laid back, content to watch the soaps all afternoon. You know, for an A-type personality, it would be intolerable to be in bed for months. So we look at the personality, and then we look, because we have limited control, look at unfinished business. When the dying labor goes on and on and on, what I'd say to the family is there anything that needs to be addressed? Often I'll hear, well, you know, mom hasn't talked to her brother in 20 years, and so you call the brother and you say, your sister's dying right now, and we're going to put the phone up to her ear. She can't respond, but she can hear you. Say what's in your heart. So you look, there's a lot of reasons that labor goes on. And so we look for those reasons and try to address them so that the person can let go when they're ready.
Oh gosh, there's so many questions. People have, you know, they want to know the why. And I'm finding, and you must do this as well, that we don't know it all, you know, and so when I answer these questions, I do it simply from my perspective only and what I've seen and witnessed, and people don't die the same. Some take a long time, some happen quickly, some talk and are fully conscious just moments before, and it's super unpredictable. And so I think that the best thing that we can do in this field of end-of-life care, whether you're a nurse, a doctor, a volunteer, a social worker, chaplain, or home health aide, however that member of team is, whatever that is, our role is to allow that family member the peace and freedom to say the things, to feel whatever they need to, and to not set limits on what is said or done at the bedside. Like, keep saying it, right? Like that. I think that we need to encourage that, and you're right. I think that the person who is dying has some stuff they too need to work out on. And I always tell people, if it's a mom, I always tell the siblings, let her know that you guys are going to stick together. I'm a mom. I want to know that my family is going to take care of each other, that my son and daughter are going to support one another. If it's a wife, she's going to worry about her husband. Make sure you let everybody know that you're going to take care of him, and vice versa. And whether that's true or not, I believe it's true. And so I would want to hand that over. I want to send someone who is dying a feeling of three things: that they mattered, that they were loved, that they will be missed. I think it's okay to let them know that they're going to be missed, and that they made a contribution, that their legacy will be carried on. Wow. So other myths, let's talk about the biggest one. Okay, this is kind of totally off topic, but going in the direction. People, what does the hospice team offer, right? It offers a nurse, a doctor, social worker, chaplain, home health aide, volunteer. It doesn't offer a caregiver. Do you get asked that a lot?
Well, and the thing is, what the family needs really more than anything is that caregiver. Mm-hmm. And it's tragic that we, as this prosperous country that we are unable to provide caregivers, to provide that which is needed the most. End-of-life doulas are entering the picture now, and they are not hired caregivers either, but they have the gift of time that they can give to the family that a certified hospice cannot. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest myths that's out there with hospice, is that the family is going to get more physical support than hospice is able to provide.
Oh, you hit it right on the head, because I probably give more than I'm supposed to, because I can't seem to leave when I think there's stuff that needs to be done. But the truth is, we have tiny increments of time. The role of a caregiver is huge. And sometimes I think families are hesitant, to have a caregiver. COVID certainly has done that by putting that fear and having them in the home. But caring for someone who is dying is incredibly hard work. And day after day, as a person declines, that work becomes harder. We cannot in hospice provide that support, but it is so needed. And I think at admission, we need to make that very clear, what 24/7 actually means. We are available, we will answer your phone calls, but if we have 3 nurses already seeing patients, you might not see us for a good amount of time. So I think we need to explain what 24/7 means. But one of the things it doesn't mean is 24/7 support in your home. And so I think our role needs to add to encouraging families to seek that type of support. And for many reasons. A wife who's caring for her husband is caring for him all day long. She's not getting any sleep. the less she sleeps, the less strength she's going to have, perseverance, ability to stay emotionally intact while caring for someone she loves. Hire a caregiver, get somebody in there to help. And if you don't have the funds to do it, find another way. Maybe get neighbors or family or a church group, somebody to come in. The volunteers, and like you said, the doulas, those people simply at the bedside to allow you to take a breath outside is so important. You are not required to be at the bedside 24/7, even though your heart wants to be. You have to take care of yourself. And that support is mandatory, I think.
And sometimes the biggest gift someone can give you as a caregiver is to come into the home, whether it's 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and say, I'm going to stay here and you go to bed, go to sleep, and know that I will take care of whatever comes up. Because that caregiver, even when they try to go to sleep, they sleep with one ear open. Because they never know. They monitor the sounds. Oftentimes they're sleeping in the same room, on a cot, on a pullout, whatever. They don't have the opportunity to really go to sleep. And that sleep is what recharges our battery. And so the biggest gift I think you can give someone that that's caring for someone in an end-of-life situation is to say, I'm coming in, I'm going to stay 4 hours, go to bed.
Pete, when we're seeing a patient, they tend to say they don't need a social worker and they don't need a chaplain. I would say, oh my goodness, please utilize them. They have so many more gifts than you realize. One of the gifts of the social worker is that he or she has so many resources. Hiring a caregiver is expensive. It is not it's not something that it's not cheap. And so perhaps that social worker could give you some resources on either how to find one that is appropriate for you, or maybe some other services that might be available to you, but also to be able to utilize, for instance, the volunteers. I mean, the volunteers can't stay all day, but that 2-hour little increment, and we need to let the families know that, because money is sometimes the thing that keeps people away from looking for support. And maybe we can find ways to, as a community, if you know somebody who is caring for someone who is dying and they don't have a large family base, or they don't have the funds to hire someone, how can we as a community reach out to them? Like you said, what if we, let's say it's your neighbor, let's say it's a friend of the family, whatever, offer an hour. An hour is a break. An hour is a breath. An hour is a moment for that person to just step away from the bedside and catch their breath. And that's huge. I think that we could do better in that regard as human beings, of course, but to let people know what is available to them. Because I think that's something they don't understand. They don't understand what is available to them.
Also, something as simple is calling on the phone and saying, I'm going to the grocery store. What can I pick up for you? Something as simple as that we don't, we take our lives so for granted until some major situation occurs. And it is a community that we need to keep us standing. It keeps us standing.
And I love the idea of community. I would love to know that I could reach out to somebody and give them that little moment of peace and respite. That's another thing, speaking of respite, some insurances actually cover that. Ask your social worker, ask what is available to you, get some understanding of some of the things that you are able to get that you don't even know of. people have no idea what is available to them. And I'd like us as a community of end-of-life care workers, or as just human beings, to really rally around the people who are trying to support and care for someone who is dying, to make it a little easier for them, because it is really hard work.
Well, and hospice does offer respite care on a limited, 7 to 10 days? Is that what
No,
it is?
it is limited, but that's a lot of time in someone's life.
Yes, it is. And that is something that we being hospice, probably doesn't utilize enough. But it is, as you said, even a few days of a break is amazing when you have the exhaustion that goes with being a caregiver, emotional as well as physical exhaustion.
Absolutely. And all of this, all of the dying process, the caring for someone who is dying, the each daily part of the routine of what that entails, that actually adds to the grief that someone takes with them, right? So how can we release their grief a little? There's so many ways. I always think, if I prepare someone at the bedside, if I get them to say the things, if I offer them the support, and that, I think, relieves some of the grief, right? One of the things that I think that is, people think they have to be there at the last breath. Mm-hmm. And I've been saying recently to people, if I were in that bedside, what I'm going to take with me, I mean, if I'm in that bed, what I'm going to take with me isn't that you were there when I took my last breath. It was the care you provided me until that moment happened. And I think people, that's another thing. I think people feel they've let someone down if they weren't there when they took their last breath. You know, I was there all day, 4 days in a row. I went home, I took a shower, I get out of the shower and I'm hurrying up to get dressed. And they called me to say that he just died, or that he's about to die. So I rushed there and he took his breath before I got there. I failed him somehow. I let him down. I think people need to know that at the end of the day, was what matters most is that you loved them well, that you honored them, that you cared for them, that you provide them with whatever they needed to be able to have that soft landing. And if they take their last breath with you away from the bedside, this is not a reflection of you or the love that you provided them. It is simply that maybe they didn't want an audience. Maybe they didn't want you to see that. Maybe that's not the last memory they wanted you to have. But what they take with them is the love and care you provided. And that, to me, is what matters most. But I think that also heightens the grief.
Well, and because we have limited control over the time that we die, I really believe that if you're with someone when they die, you are with them because they wanted you there. Mm-hmm. If you are not with someone when they die, and you tried to be, and you wanted to be, then let go of the guilt that you carry and take that as a gift of protection that their loved one gave. You know, we have that much control, and oftentimes, oftentimes, we die when our loved ones are not there as a gift of taking care of them.
I think that there are ways that we can help reduce the grief that people experience after someone dies. And part of them are conversations like this. You know, I think people need to, we own stuff we shouldn't have to, like someone taking their last breath before we get there. And I really want people to know that it's okay. You know, it's okay if you were there only 3 days instead of 4. You know, we beat ourselves up. And I think we have to stop doing that, because you're going to take that with you the rest of your life. And the person that you love, that person you said goodbye to, that's the very last thing they would want. And so I think our role as end-of-life care providers is to give that whole package of stuff to hand them over, right? To say, look, these are some things that you're going to see. This might be something you or they might experience. These are things you should say and do. And at the end of the day, give them a free pass to feel whatever they too need to feel. I think people hold stuff in because they're afraid they're going to upset someone else. I mean, have you experienced that as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the point that you and I are both trying to get across is that end of life work is 90% education. That, dying and death has been such a taboo subject. Nobody talks about it. It's just now really coming forward in more of a way than it has for a long time. And that could be COVID, thank you very much, that it has put dying and death in everybody's face and is making everyone talk about and consider death. Because up to COVID, it's kind of like other people die. I'm not going to die, and neither is anyone close to me. And so we spend our life being ostriches with our head in the sand, and then someone close to us gets a life-threatening illness, and we're totally unprepared, and we're in shock and, all of these emotions because we haven't looked at the fact that everybody dies. We are born, we experience, and we die, that is a part of living. And COVID brought it to our consciousness, I think, more than anything has in a long time. And so we who work in end of life can use this awareness that others are having to do even more education. That's what you and I are doing today.
Yes.
Is providing more education so that when the time comes in everyone's life where they are dealing with their own death or someone close to them, they have some tools in their toolbox on how to live through this experience.
I think people think if they talk about it, it'll happen quicker. You're not going to die sooner if you talk about it. And my philosophy is, if we talk about it right now, sitting at the dinner table, playing a game of the death deck, right? Greatest card game. You pull out a deck, you say, where do you want to be when you die? And your mom says, oh gosh, we shouldn't talk about that. No, Mom, really, where do you want to be? Well, I'd really love to be, by the ocean. I want an ocean view. Really, Mom? I had no idea. What if we had that conversation? What if we just talked about it like we talk about what we're doing tomorrow, and make it that casual so that we have all the information that we need, right? Like, we know where someone wants to be, how they want to be cared for, what they want to wear, what music they want to listen to. Let's honor if we really love someone, let's honor their wishes. But we can't honor your wishes if you don't tell us what they are. What we need to do is make it easy and comfortable to have that conversation now, to know those things now. I have an envelope that says, when I die. In it, it is where I want my ashes scattered. But prior to that, it's where I want to be, how I want to be cared for, who I want there, who I don't want there. And I have an entire playlist of music that I want listened, everywhere from Tom Petty and the Grateful Dead to Pink Floyd. And then I've got some beautiful ending stuff just before my last breaths are taken. I have choreographed the most beautiful death possible because this is about me. This is my choice. I want us to talk about it. People, come on, let's have the conversation. Sit down with your family. Start with where, go buy the death deck. I mean, this is not a PR for them. It seriously is a great card game.
It is a card.
And pull out a card. Sit down with a glass of wine with your family and answer some great questions. Get to know your family. It actually brings people closer together when you have those conversations because they're real. And if you love someone that much, then honor their wishes by asking them what they are.
And it isn't age related. I mean,
Exactly.
at Thanksgiving dinner, after we have all eaten and we're waiting for the food to settle, we have grandkids, friends, whoever's there for Thanksgiving dinner, which is generally 25, 26 people. We pull out the questions and we have a question and go around the table and all of us share whatever our perspective is on whatever the question happens to be. How, it's community building,
Mhm.
it's knowledge that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great, do I say entertainment? It really is, and yet so valuable, the information and the getting to know each other even better.
And it really, I was at a death a couple months ago, and it was a wife and a mother. And the husband, I said, would you like me to help bathe her and dress her? And he said, yes. And so I was doing that. And the daughter, and she was about 16, I think, she came and she goes, Dad, don't forget the green shawl. Remember, Mom said she wanted to wear the green shawl. And there was this like warm fuzzy in my heart because together they helped dress her and made her look beautiful. And they wrapped this green shawl. And the fact that the daughter knew that, that's huge. And it's not an easy conversation to have. And it's a little bumpy getting it started. But what if you simply start by saying, okay, guys, I just want you to know that when it's my time, I want big cozy comforter, I want an ocean view, and I want Tom Petty playing as much as possible. Just putting that out there, and then someone at the table will go, oh, well, wait, what about Jim Croce? Or what about Joan Baez? Or, oh yeah, that's good too. Have you guys made your playlist? No, I haven't made a playlist. Let's make a playlist. This is something that like you said, it could bring your family closer. It can start the conversation. And it's not as scary as people think. It's uncomfortable because the reality of death is right there in your face. But here's the reality: we're all going to die. Why not wait till that last moment, or sometimes when it's too late, to know the things?
Yeah.
I love these conversations with you.
Aren't they fun?
Yeah,
I mean, I suppose that sounds a little weird to say fun, but it is. I mean, it is just so stimulating to have this kind of real conversation. And so often our conversations in the world with people aren't real. They're just, and this is real. Yeah.
People, I always joke, I say, people don't ask me how my day is because they're afraid I'm going to tell them, because chances are I'm going to say, well, I had this really great death today. And the look on their face, or, oh gosh, here she goes again, she's going to talk about death. But what you guys don't realize, if you're not in this field, we see a lot of death, but we see life, and we see love, and we see culture and tradition and faith. Oh my gosh, I'm exposed to so much faith, and I'm exposed to life, and we are exposed to things that remind us how precious and fragile life is. And if the more death I see, the more beautifully I want to live my life, and I want to love fully. And the only way we can do that is by being true to ourselves and the people we love. And honestly, Barbara, I think having these conversations can only make our bond tighter with the people that we love.
As you were talking, what went through my mind was how often because death is just so much a part of conversation in life for me, because I mean, that's where my life is centered for 40 some years. But I'll be someplace and I'll start talking, and then I really tune in to the facial expression of the person I'm talking to. And I think, oops, I've gone a little too far here, because it's so natural to me. And I so want people to be open that I have to be careful and tread a little more. What do I want to say? I have to be
Gently.
more, aware of facial expressions and see if I've just, shocked people. My husband used to say, Barbara, I would come home from work and I would tell him my day. And after a very short while, he said to me, Barbara, you can't tell me this stuff. I can't handle it. And so I had to find a person who I could talk to about my day, because I realized I needed to download my day. And I think in taking care of ourselves, we who work an end of life, that it's important that we recognize and have a buddy that we can share our innermost thoughts about living and dying with, to keep ourselves healthy, and that we can't do that with just everybody.
No. And sometimes I admittedly, this is just between you and me and, everyone who's here. Sometimes I'll say hospice nurse just to see the reaction I'll get. Oh, and it's true. I sometimes I enjoy that a little bit, but you're right. I think that we have to reel it in sometimes, but we have to find our tribe. I am blessed in that I do have a good group of people that I can talk to about it. I mean, my friend Lorna, I can call her and say, can I tell you about a death? And she said, oh yes, tell me everything. But you can't do that with everyone. And I think that we need to respect that as well, because not everybody is ready. Do we want to push the conversation? Yes, but we have to be considerate about it, because some people need to hear it in little doses. And some people are incredibly emotional and have an emotional and physical reaction to the things that we share. So it's important to find someone to talk to. I think that is part of self-care, because we have to talk about what we do. When you are working in this work, we see last breaths. We say more goodbyes than anyone else. And it takes its toll, and it's heavy. And we have to practice self-care. That is so important. And if you don't, then it just it keeps piling on top of each other like mud, and you can't walk through mud. So we have to talk about it and find a tribe.
Well, and I learned a long, long time ago that I needed closure for every death that I was involved in. And I found my ritual for closure so that I could then move on. And whether I went to visitations, long story, but today there are less and less visitations. Something as simple as having a journal and writing the name of the patient that died, the day, and a couple of sentences about that person, and then bless them on their journey. You have some closure so that you can move forward for the next patient and the next family. And I learned that in self-care for us who work an end of life, that's vital, that we must have closure for each of our patients, because we give a piece of ourselves. And as much as for the majority of my patients, I am not emotionally involved. I love them as children of God, but I don't love them from my own emotional base. There are people that come into my personal space that Barbara loves.
Mm.
And those people I need even more closure so that I can move forward. If every patient got into Barbara's personal space, Barbara wouldn't be able to continue doing this work. And it does, and I'm not giving the impression that I don't care and love every single family and patient that has touched my life,
Mm.
but I love them as children of God,
Mm.
not as Barbara. And I think we who work in end of life have to have that conversation with ourselves in order to continue doing the work.
Some deaths, of course, I always have a reaction. There are some that remind me of things that I'm still trying to navigate grief from. Some experiences will re-trigger some of my own personal emotions. Some I simply just hold space for them. And some they come into Gabby's space, like what you were saying, and I have a little extra reaction to them. And I don't know if you've heard me talk about my grief bowl. I have this bowl, I collect hearts, and this bowl is filled with crystal hearts and gold hearts and rock hearts and wood hearts, and there's just all these hearts. And what I do, especially when I've had an emotional death, but almost with all of them, because I also have to say goodbye, because this is an end of a life. And I, like you, need to have closure. So I take my bowl of hearts, I put it on the table, I spill out all of my hearts, and I take each one in my hand. And every time it's different. It just depends on my reaction. But I will usually start with the person who died and hope that their journey was peaceful. I thank them for trusting me to be at their bedside, because I consider that an honor. And then I work through all the things. I think about the lessons that I took from them, the gifts that they've given me simply by being present there. And I honor a life that has ended and a life that has to go on without them. And I go through each one of my hearts. And until that bowl is that all the hearts have been touched in my hands. And then I take all of the hearts and I put them back in the bowl, and I put them on my shelf of special things. Yes, my shelf has a name. And I put it on my shelf of special things, and I say thank you, because to be able to do this work, to be present for the end of life, and to those who say goodbye, it is a beautiful thing, but it is incredibly hard. And self-care is mandatory, and you have to find your way. I love your idea of the journal. I'm not good at that. I've tried that. So, we have to, there's so many different ways, whether you journal or talk to someone or hold your grief bowl, you have to find closure on those deaths that we see.
Yeah, it's vital in order for us to continue to do the work that we do.
Yes. Susan, is it almost time?
Time for Q&A. One question that I have, and I get asked this quite a lot. What is it that hospice pays for? Because most people don't realize they've already paid for hospice. It's part of their Medicare benefit. That's shocking to a lot of people, that they've already saved up their whole life for this benefit, and then often don't know about it until the last week or so of their life. So maybe just say a couple of words about that, and also what hospice covers and what hospice doesn't cover for people. Because I've heard people also saying, oh, I was approached, somebody came to my door and they tried to sign me up for hospice. So there's also a lot of, hospice originally, its intention when it was thought about and put together back in the 70s was really based on a sort of, I think, a family-centric kind of culture where families lived in close proximity to each other. Hospice was an additional support to teach family members how to care for their loved ones. And in the 70s, at least in the US, many families lived in pretty close proximity to each other. That's all changed now, where like my mother was living, and her 4 children, one child was living very close by, the other 4 were thousands of miles away. So this idea that hospice is coming in to support people like in a family kind of environment, that worked for a long time, and now it's much harder. So this idea that caregivers aren't part of the hospice benefit, I think, is very important for people to understand. But also, could you just maybe talk a little bit about what other things are included in the hospice benefit? Like room and board, if somebody goes to a hospice house, in some cases that's covered by the hospice. Often it's not, it's an out-of-pocket expense. And maybe just talk a little bit about the ways people can get hospice in their homes or in a hospice house, or what they might want to be looking for prior to be really ill. Because when you're really ill, as both of you know, the family and the person who's ill doesn't have the energy to be doing all of this kind of research, and often are in the position of doing it.
Barbara?
Well, I was thinking that you would be the better person to explain what hospice does, because you are working in hospice now. What I have is what hospice used to do and how that has changed to today. So I think what's important is, what does hospice offer today? And then we'll see where that goes.
Okay, so I'm not super good at all the anything to do with insurance or anything that goes beyond that. But one thing I can tell you is that, okay, let's start with medications. Hospice does cover medications, not all medications. It has to be the ones, and I believe, and forgive me if I say this incorrectly, but it has to be medications that are relative to the hospice diagnosis and the system relief kits. And the doctor determines that, the MD. So not all medications, but most. Also, there's incontinence supplies. You know, for our company, we do supply things like diapers and pull-ups and gloves and wipes and chucks and creams and lotions and bathing care to a certain extent, and not a variety of different brands. I mean, it's some bare minimums, but that is an expense that can add to families who do not have the funds. So sometimes I don't think they know that. Like, I'll say, well, do you have any, you know, someone will say, I just bought a bunch of packages of diapers. Well, why did you do that? We can supply that for you. And they were unaware. They were unaware that we might provide wound care supplies. I mean, it's not all of the supplies, but it's enough to get you through this situation. And we supply things like a wheelchair, a bedside commode, a hospital bed, a bedside table, walkers. I mean, there are quite a few supplies and equipment that we can supply, which will make things a lot easier. Hospice covers that. Now, as far as the team, you do get a doctor. And while you may or may not ever physically see them, they are very present in the care. You will receive a nurse and at least one time a week. You'll receive a social worker and a chaplain, both, I believe, one time a week, unless needed more. Home health aide, which will come and provide bathing in the home. And people always say, oh, we don't need that. But I mean, I can only speak for our home health aides. They are amazing. And people always think, well, how are they going to do it if they're stuck in a bed? The bath that they provide in a bed is, I would want that. They're gentle, they're compassionate, and it feels good. And your loved one deserves to have that care. Now, it's not 6 hours. It's an hour, maybe a little bit more, but it's like a spa day. I mean, you know, I certainly colored it up a bit, but it's a lovely thing that we do. And we provide volunteers. Volunteers are amazing. That's part of what we supply in your home. This whole team comes together to create a more comfortable environment for you and the person you love. And I don't think people are aware of just how much that would benefit them. Can you think of anything, if I'm forgetting anything?
Well, that this care can be provided in a nursing facility, that there is limited respite care, that there is inpatient hospitalization if the problem is not fixable at home. that they can go into a hospital setting to manage symptoms. I don't know how much that is used. I know that when I was involved in hospice, and I've been everything from a primary care nurse to director, we didn't use very much inpatient. I know now that inpatient can be applied to hospice houses. Is that correct?
I think some insurances can assist with that. I'm not good at that stuff though. But I do think that these are all things your social worker could help you with. And that goes with the resources of the social worker. They do so much more, and I think that people don't realize that. If you have a question about that, let's say, for instance, and I'm kind of going off topic a little bit, but let's say you have to leave work for a few days and your work says, sorry, I'll need a note from the doctor. Your social worker can help you with that. I don't know to what extent they help with things like with banking or when someone dies, all that. How do I get all this stuff? Well, if the social worker can't do it for you, they can certainly guide you in a really great direction. They can provide you with a list of resources for caregiving. They can help you with funeral needs, helping you to, because who knows how to do that? That's not something we know. They can help you with that. And bereavement. Bereavement is also another underrated member of our team. And we have it for months after. When someone you love has died, we don't close the door on you. And that's really important. We don't suddenly say, okay, we're done here now, we have to go. We are here for you. We are here for you. We're here for your family. We're here for your longtime caregiver who also became close to that person who had died. Our bereavement team is phenomenal. And what the work that they do and the care that they provide to you while you navigate the grief process is huge. But I don't think people fully understand that benefit that comes with the hospice team.
And I think oftentimes families, when you're grieving, the key thing to grieving is isolation. We don't have the energy to reach out. We don't have the energy to leave the house, go to the store, let alone be involved in a grief support group. And yet a lot of hospices offer a grief support group before COVID. I think maybe some are doing it on Zoom now. But the first reaction is, no, I don't want to do that. When really the support that group can give you is immeasurable. The hardest part is getting people to attend because of the isolation that grieving has. That's one of the key things is I don't have the energy to leave my house. I don't have the energy to talk to you or to anyone. And so grief and bereavement follow-up is really a wonderful, wonderful resource that hospice offers. It's just, as you said, little known is known about it. And it's kind of at the bottom of the list, and yet it really belongs way up here because it's important.
And what is that? There's a question. When do you need to start bereavement? Well, not just after someone dies, before, at that diagnosis, get that support. And this is sort of out of order, but the other one that I think is a little bit misunderstood is the chaplain. I think people immediately assume that someone is going to sit there and tell you that you need to find God. That is not the case. With the chaplains, it's about spiritual support. It's about listening. They listen with no intention of fixing, simply to hear you and honor your words. There's so much unknown about death. People are afraid to die. They want to know, where am I going? What is going to happen to me? What is it going to be like? And that spiritual care, that chaplain, the spiritual support that we offer can help answer some of those unknowns, those questions that so many people have. And there is a real valid feeling of fear when you are about to die. And the person that I would want to go to would be my chaplain, because I would want to understand it. I have found that people with a deep commitment to faith sort of already have that, right? They know where they're going. They feel comforted in knowing that they will be cared for well, and that they have peace in their heart with that. I envy that, because I'm not there. But I do know that I have some unknowns, you know, and I think that the spiritual care supports that, and they listen. And so fear is real. That should be addressed. All of there's so much more we can offer you that I think people are unaware of, or maybe they've only gotten little tidbits out of it. And so I hope that if we do anything here at all, it's to raise some more questions. Like, I didn't know that. I'm going to ask about this for Dad. Dad could really use this.
I think as you're talking, it occurred to me that one of the myths that we deal with in hospice is when to refer. That people are hesitant to accept a referral from hospice, because that means Dad's going to die. And so I don't want to bring hospice in too soon. I put that in quotes. And what I want people to know is that it is in the months before death that hospice does great work, because we help people live the best they can within the confines that their body and disease has put them in. Because so often someone's been told, I can't fix you, go home, put your affairs in order. And they sit down in their favorite recliner, and they might as well have died that moment, because they stop living. And hospice helps people live. Unfortunately, because people are afraid to get on hospice, they wait until the person indeed looks like they're dying, when in months before death, they look sick, they look ill, but they don't look like they're dying. When they look like they're dying, they're weeks, 1 to 3 weeks before death. And then they're so removed from their body that there isn't a lot we can do on a conscious level with them. We're working on an unconscious level with the patient, and a lot of crisis intervention with the family to get them to find them some peace and some guidance and support. So if too early, there are patients that we bring on that we discharge.
Yes.
And say, you know, brought you on too long, you're not declining, but we have helped them live. We've given them tools. And then when they do need us,
They can come back.
They can call us. That doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. There's no downside to a too early referral to hospice.
I always say, if we could do anything differently, it would be to bring our patients on sooner. You know, I've heard comments of, well, my dad's been in pain for months, but we weren't ready for hospice. You were ready for hospice. Mm-hmm. And if you are questioning that, talk to your doctor. If there is a diagnosis that is without any doubt 6 months left to live, talk to your doctor about hospice and start then. Start at diagnosis. And like Barbara said, I mean, sure, if you rally a bit, you can get off hospice and you can come back on. However that works out, the bottom line is to, for lack of a better word, is to take advantage of what is provided you during that time. What if we can reduce your symptoms so much so that you do get off to hospice for however long? What if you don't have to say, he's been in pain for weeks? I want to make sure that people don't have pain for weeks, that they don't sit around wondering what they're going to do, that they feel alone or scared or uncertain of what the future holds. Trust us to help you. And I understand there's been bad experiences. I get that. And I can't change that. I can't, we can't remove that from your heart. And I'm sorry for that. But I can assure you that the majority of the people who work in hospice, their sole purpose, their intention is set with the entire goal of reducing symptoms. And I ask that you trust us on that, because that's what we want to do.
Thank you both so much. I want to go now that we have some questions. We have two people who have been very patiently holding their hand up this whole time. But I wanted to just early on, two people asked sort of identical questions. One was mentioning that his mom has died in the last couple of months, and the hospice cared for her beautifully. It was very supportive to the family, but they did not ever tell her she was on hospice. And then right after that, somebody else asked about, you know, for people that don't want to know, or for families that don't feel that they can talk about that, what would you reflect about that?
Oh, can I have this one, Barbara?
Mhm.
You can too, of course. Oh my gosh. Okay, this is, I'm sure people are just going to say, like, not be happy that I said this, but please don't keep that a secret from someone who is dying. I'm sorry. That is a human being who is about to end their life, and you're holding that from them. And that doesn't seem kind or compassionate in any way to me. You know, they're not going to die sooner because you told them that they're on hospice. But to have them lie in a bed, knowing physically, they are very aware, whether they are verbal or nonverbal, what is happening to their bodies. And this is their life. I think they deserve to know choices that are being made on their behalf. And if people are coming in and out of the door, clearly they are of some clinical form, right? They're here, a nurse, a doctor, someone there to check on them. They deserve to know who's coming into their space and why. And if someone is given a terminal diagnosis with very little time left, I think they should have the right to know, so that if there's something else they need to do or say or finish before it's too late, you've taken that away from them. And people deserve the right to have a choice on how they die, and how they're cared for when they die. And everyone, in my opinion, deserves the right to have those last words. And when you take that from them, that's not kind.
Oh, 100% agree. And that's part of our job in working at end of life, is to help the family understand that they've been given a gift, and that's a gift of time. And this person lives inside their body. As you said, they know that they can't be fixed and that they're going to die. And by not having it out in the open and talking about it, you have taken away the gift of communication and interaction with each other. I view our job is to get the family to understand what they're taking away by not talking about it. I also say, I won't bring up the word hospice, but I won't lie. And if they ask me anything, I'm going to give them the truth as I know it. And while I will do that with the patient, that whole time I'm working with the family to get them to understand and to see the gift they've been given by bringing out and talking about it.
I agree with you.
Why don't we go to Linda? Linda, if you want to take your camera off, you don't need to do this, but if you wanted to do that, then I would drop you down here with Gabby and Barbara.
I'm not going to take my camera off, but I unmuted myself.
Thank you. Why don't you go ahead and you have the floor here.
All right, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank you too for this presentation. I'm really not sure how I found out about the link. My husband is in an advanced state of dementia and is on hospice care at his care facility. So I may have gotten the link that way. But this has been very interesting to me. And I do have a question. My husband went on hospice. He had already been in the facility. I mean, dementia, the advanced form of dementia that he has. I mean, it's where he needed to be. But in late September, the care facility felt like maybe he had a kidney failure. And I said, well, that's, all right, you can check it, but I don't want you to treat it. And they said, oh, well, we can't check it unless we can treat it. And I said, yeah, but he's got a DNR and he's got an OR, he's got all of the stuff. And they said, well, maybe it's time for hospice. And I said, well, fine. If that's what I need, give me the referral. So we got the referral, went through that process. And then I was told, well, there's two kinds of hospice. There's hospice that is supported by Medicare, and your husband will be able to have more assistance weekly, like the showers and the baths and stuff. And you will have a hospice nurse who will take over his medicine, but not a psychiatric medicine. It's very complicated, as you guys probably know. And so my concern and my question has been ever since end of September is, well, is he 6 months away from dying? And the answer is, well, that's the only way you could be on hospice. And then my question is, well, then does that mean, he's at the end stage of the dementia? And they said, oh, and by they, I mean the hospice nurse. Well, there's no way we can tell that. I said, well, if he goes past 6 months, well, then we might have to evaluate and he may not be on hospice anymore. And I said, okay, so then what are we getting from hospice? Am I getting the ability for him to not be treated, which is what we want, which he signed off on, which we have every legal document? Or is this giving the care facility extra help because they're really short-staffed now with COVID? And of course, I don't get an answer to that, but I have so many questions about, and I've talked to the chaplain and I've talked to the social worker, and then the social worker retired. It's like, where am I? And it to me, it's not clear. I mean, he doesn't, all right, I'm going to quit mumbling. That's what my big question is are there really two kinds of hospice?
I don't think so.
I would say they're for-profit hospices and not-for-profit hospices. And that is something that is rarely talked about in these kinds of.
I can't see who's speaking. Oh, I know. It's the one I know this is a for-profit.
Yes. And so it's Susan that's speaking. I will just say, because I don't want to put anybody else here on the spot, but there's this is not to say that there aren't fantastic people working in for-profit hospices, but generally for-profit hospices, their bottom line is that they need to make a profit. This is also not to say in not-for-profit hospices that we don't need to keep our heads above the water. That's certainly true. There's been some research done in the last 10 years. It was very rare when I started hospice in the 90s that there were for-profit hospices. About 15% of all hospices were for-profit. Now the reality is all but 10% of hospices are for-profit. If you can find a local not-for-profit community-based hospice in general, this is all very general terms, you're going to find people that are much more capable of caring for your loved one in the community that you live in, because a lot of these hospice programs that are for-profit are national. They have one model that's supposed to work in rural America in an urban environment. That doesn't really translate. So there is not more than one kind of hospice according to the Medicare benefit. But there are many for-profit hospices that do take on patients with dementia because they tend to be low care. They do not have to provide the kind of acuity that you might have to provide for somebody that has
Correct.
end-stage ALS, all of that. So they will take these kinds of patients, they get reimbursed, at least currently, this is going to change, the same amount that they get reimbursed if they were providing tons of
Right.
skilled care.
Yeah.
So one of my jobs as a community educator around end of life is to really, help people start to consider these things way before we're at the point where you are, where you're really trying to care for your husband. You should be getting support. They should be helping you navigate what your needs are around his dementia care. They should also be providing additional support in terms of bathing and things like that.
They are.
CNA
We are.
and those sorts of things. But if you feel like there's questions that are not being answered, you may want to just see in your own community, just do a preemptive call to a not-for-profit local community-based hospice and just say,
I have done that.
Yeah. And just see if the care would be any different. They may be able to offer a different level of care, or better care, just because.
Well, I mean, my husband's getting fine care. It
Mhm.
just seems to me that he doesn't really need to be on hospice. I mean, he's not at the end of his life. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know how long he could live, if he had a stroke tomorrow, maybe not that long, but being able to get answers from anybody about that, because I'm under this impression that when you're on hospice, you are within 6 months of dying. And okay, so I guess the answer to my question is, just because he's on this current hospice, I could switch it. I could switch to the not-for-profit one, which I know I'm familiar with it. And then they would take over his care if they felt like he truly needed to be on hospice.
That's correct. And just so people understand, like every single diagnosis has a different set of criteria. So you could have somebody with stage 4 cancer that they're not aggressively treating to cure it. They could be walking around and going to lunch. They would qualify for hospice. You could have somebody with end stage dementia that has not spoken for months, that's in a bed, not really eating, but also not losing weight. They may not qualify for hospice because of the Medicare guidelines that hospice programs have to follow in order to admit that person. You can be on hospice for longer than 6 months if the hospice team can demonstrate a decline in that person's physical capacity. And with dementia, it's often, is that person, bedbound? Is that person no longer able to really eat or eating minimally? Are they losing weight? Those are the criteria for dementia care in hospice. So somebody has to be quite far down that road of dementia.
I mean, he did make the criteria. I mean, he was approved for hospice in late September, and he still is. But
I mean, you might want to just get another hospice to do a benefit, like just to do a check, just to do an information visit, just to look and see what they would think. That is a possibility. But the specifics of that, of your husband's case, is probably something that, if you're not getting if the hospice isn't being responsive to you and what your questions are and what your concerns are, I would also just personally.
Oh, no, they are. I mean, the thing is, is like I said, so does this mean, is he getting closer to the end of life? Because honestly, these long-term early onset dementias are not, well, you guys know. And the answer is, oh, well, we don't think so. And then I think, well, then why? Anyway, I'll pursue it with the not-for-profit and see if they'll go out and do an evaluation, because I am confused. Not that he isn't getting good care, but is he going to be, see, my mind when a person go on hospice is that they're getting towards the end of life. But it doesn't look to me like my husband is. I mean, looks like he could go on another year or two. And this is what I it's a confusion to me. And yes, with COVID and putting someone in a home during this COVID time, when you already can see that the homes are so understaffed, that if they have this way of getting some more staff, well, good, I'm happy for that. But it did seem like a question, and it seems like you guys agree that there are not two kinds of hospice, and I need to get the not-for-profit one.
Thank you so much, Linda. And we're going to go. I know we're a little bit over time. If we can stay I just want to get Gail's question answered.
Go ahead. I'm sorry I went on so long.
No worries. No, that's fine. Gail, do you want to go ahead and ask?
Yes. The question was asked, you answered part of it. It was, I'm a chaplain for the Sheriff's Department, and I'm interested in becoming a chaplain for hospice. What exactly would be a chaplain's duty as part of the team for a person?
Abby, go for it.
I don't know if I'll answer that. I mean, honestly, what I would suggest you do is call your local hospice and ask them what the chaplain, from what they do and what they offer. From my experience, they offer spiritual support. They offer, what they do, they listen.
Yeah.
And they listen with the intent to hear, and they validate how someone is feeling. And there's that. And then if it's a religious-based person, if this person needs religion and doesn't have a spiritual connection, then they will help provide that. If someone needs the anointing of the sick, they can arrange for that. Mostly it's about answering some of those mysteries, and the questions that people have, and providing that type of support. And it starts with listening. They're incredibly beautiful listeners, and then it goes from there.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question.
Also, at least when I was running a hospice, the chaplain was part of the team meeting that we had. And so there would be that commitment to sit with the team when you're discussing the patients, so that you are aware of what's going on with that family and the patient and can give your input. And there would be times when you'd say, hey, this is something that I can do. Yeah, I'm here. And so being part of the team is really important.
Thank you so much for your help, and I've really enjoyed this session. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gail, somebody just put up in chat a resource for you that will help you suss this out. I want to thank Barbara and Gabby just so much for this conversation. I can't think of a better way to start the year off. This has been recorded, so we will be, I will share the recording with you once it's edited. That might take a day or two. And I'll also, I've compiled some of these resources that people have put up here around doulas and doula training. And just to be very clear, hospices do not pay for doula services. Hospice, that is not a service that is covered. That was a question people asked. We do have a monthly death cafe with the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation that is often sold out because we only have about 20 people, space for about 20 people. Our next event, we are going to be hosting Francesca Arnoldi, who is a beautiful, she's a wonderful death doula, and she has also done some work with children. She's wrote a beautiful book called A Map of Memory Lane, and she's going to be speaking on the 27th of this month, and there will be an email that goes out to everybody, so you'll have that information. And then we have a bunch of events coming up in February, and I'm currently scheduling for March and April right now, so thank you so much. Death cafes are free. There is a wonderful deathcafe.com resource. It's an international resource. There's death cafes going on every day of the week in almost as many languages as there are available for people to speak. So Barbara and Gabby, really thank you so much for the beautiful conversation, for your ability to really talk in very clear terms about death, dying, loss, and grief, and to make this conversation to start the year for the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation possible. So thank you all. I am going to be turning off the recording now and wishing you all well. And I will stay in the room for a couple of minutes. after we're done. So thank you all.